Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our presentation on comparing award letters. Hopefully, you are in a position right now when you're thinking towards this, whether it's you or a student in your life that is thinking about financial aid. So hopefully we can answer some questions for you and kind of untangle whatever things you're thinking about right now. My name is Sarah Scruggs. I am the Community Engagement Specialist at the Harvard University Employees Credit Union, and my colleague Magdalia Gomez will be joining us about halfway through the presentation. She's also going to be monitoring any of your questions in the chat, so please know that if there are questions that come up, don't hesitate to ask us. For today's webinar, we have gone ahead and muted everybody who is not a presenter on the call. That way you can continue eating your lunch, picking up around you if that's what you need to do during this time, but hopefully you're able to get on and hear a little bit, but feel safe enough to not have to be perfectly quiet on your end. Just because you're muted doesn't mean that we don't want you to ask questions. Like I said, we highly recommend that you ask questions. This is a very personal process, and so you may have questions that others have as well, but they just haven't asked. So I highly recommend submitting questions. You can actually find the questions feature on the right-hand side of your screen or at the top navigation, depending on how you logged in today. So if you could, number one, to let me know that you can hear me, and number two, to let me know that you know where the questions feature is. If you could, please put in there where you are joining us from today, or what year the student is in your life. Are they a junior? Are they a senior? Are they going back to college? Can you tell me that in the questions feature? Awesome. Okay, I see some people are writing in. Great. I'll give you a couple minutes to complete that. As a reminder as well, this presentation is being recorded and it will be posted to our YouTube channel, so that if you do miss a couple of slides or some specific details about something, you can rewatch this. So please know that you're more than welcome to do that, and we'll send this information to you via email tomorrow. Great, awesome. So I see that we've got someone joining us from Medford, Somerville, Everett, great. And we've got a junior, awesome, and then a first year graduate student. Wonderful, this is great to know. Thank you so much. Harvard University Employees Credit Union is the not-for-profit financial institution that exclusively serves the Harvard community, including all of you who are employees at MGB, whether that be at a hospital or at MGB as a whole. You are welcome to join the credit union. If you are looking for a new financial institution, we'd love to tell you more about it. We believe that we are just like a bank, but we do everything a little bit better. If you have questions about the credit union or joining the credit union, we are happy to answer those as well today. Or if something comes up in the future, we're happy to answer that for you as well. I'm going to pass it over to Kimberly from MGB EAP to tell us a little bit more about the EAP program.
Thank you, Sarah. Happy to be here today. So my name is Kimberly Smith, and I'm one of the EAP consultants for MGB. So the Employee Assistance Program is a free service for all MGB employees and their immediate household members over the age of 18. So some of the things here on your slide that we do provide is assessment, short-term problem solving, and referrals. So a lot of our employees call us for personal and well-being concerns, and that's listed there. You know, anything around your own stress and resilience, any grief or loss, or in general, anything that you're struggling with that focuses on your personal and well-being. We also have a lot of consults with managers and directors about workplace, either supporting staff during difficult times, whether that be a critical incident, or helping facilitate a work-life seminar like we're doing today for the HUECU. And so we also provide a lot of resources, so family and life. So if you are interested in looking into any resources related to childcare, maybe elder care, if you're looking for a referral for legal, or just need some general resources on parenting, we have so much information that's all vetted on our website. And that's listed here as eap.partners.org. And if you want to call and speak to one of the EAP staff, just reach out to us at that number, 866-724-4327, and you'll be connected to an EAP staff to set up an appointment. We're here to help, and we also have 24/7 coverage for nights, weekends. So if you're in a crisis and would like to talk to one of our counseling staff, you can always do that, and you'd always be able to reach someone. So thank you all for joining us today. I will stay on the call, so if there's any EAP related questions at the end, I'd be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Kimberly, and thank you, EAP, for partnering with us for these programs that we put on throughout the year. And we actually have the entire calendar year planned for our finance series with EAP. So wherever you registered for this particular webinar, you can actually find all of our other webinars with EAP at huecu.org/EAP. And that way you can sign up for any others that may interest you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that come from those as well. So getting started on our topic today and talking a little bit more about comparing award letters, and I'm glad that you all have joined us today. We've got a range of ages and places in our schooling journey. So hopefully this will be helpful for all of you. But the first thing to think about when we're talking about college financing and comparing award letters is, how did we get to the award letter stage? So there are a couple of different things you need to go through before you actually receive your award letter. And just to give you a little bit of background on myself and Migdalia, we both previously worked in higher education, working closely with the financial aid offices at each of our institutions. So not only do we feel like we understand and know a little bit more about this process, but also hopefully can answer any questions, even if they are a little more specific. We're happy to help. So with college financing, it really does begin with the FAFSA. This is the same form for undergraduate students and graduate students. My husband is a graduate student, and each year we can complete the FAFSA as well. And so the FAFSA is an important document that you will have filled out prior to receiving any award letters. People ask me a lot of times, you know, Sarah, I really don't think we'll qualify for anything. Should I still complete the FAFSA? My answer is, I always recommend you complete it at least once just to see. Because that way your student, number one, will qualify for any federal aid that they do qualify for, which includes student loans, federal student loans. Each student is awarded federal student loans no matter the need of the family. So understand that. And then number two, a lot of schools will take this information to give any of their need-based aid as well. So I encourage you, highly, highly encourage you to fill out the FAFSA. This is an important step in the process, but this is something that has happened. Normally it opens in the fall, in October, so that's a good time to fill it out. And then you'll receive your award letter in the spring. Other aid, some schools are now using other profiles, other forms to get more information on families so that they can better provide financial aid and have a clearer picture. This is normally what you'll see, the CSS profile. You'll see quite a bit for undergraduate students, and the college financial aid application is what you'll see more for graduate students. I know me and my husband, we fill out a college financial aid form specific to his institution each year. And this gives them more information about, okay, what money do we have on hand? How many loans have we taken out in the past? Things of that nature that help them make a better decision on how much money they're awarding us moving forward. And then the CSS profile is done through the College Board. Some institutions will ask you for additional information with this CSS profile. It is not as common. The FAFSA is the most common, most used. It's universally used at all institutions across the country to see what families' needs are. And then the CSS profile is sometimes used by some institutions. So don't worry if an institution doesn't ask you to fill out the CSS. Not every institution will. So we filled out those forms, we filled them out in the fall, sent them off to the schools that we applied to, and now we have our award letters in hand. And the reason why we kind of go through this process in the spring is because a lot of seniors right now are receiving their award letters. A lot of students will start receiving them in March, April, to learn a little bit more about their financial picture at each institution they've applied to. So there are 3 types of financial aid that you'll see on an award letter. The first being federal work study. And this is the case for graduate students and undergraduate students alike. This comes in the form of a paycheck to the student and is not deducted directly on your bill. This is something that a lot of families are expecting to have deducted from their bill, but please know this is not included on your bill. This is the paper check, normally biweekly check that comes to a student if they have a job on campus that is paying them through this program. This is not a guaranteed offer of employment. Your student or yourself will have to still apply for jobs. It is their responsibility to do this. Many universities and colleges have job boards for their students, or maybe even a job fair at the beginning of fall semester. But it is so important that your student, if they've received federal work study, goes and finds a job that meets the federal work study requirements. And again, like I said, this will not be deducted on your bill. It will be in the form of a paycheck, and it is up to the students to do what they will with this. You'll see loans on your financial aid letter, and this award letter will contain the federal student loan options available to the student. These loan options can look like many different things, and we'll talk through those in just a couple of moments, but know that there will not be any private loans on your award letter from the college or institution that your student has applied to. It's important to know that. Grants and scholarships. If your student has been awarded any merit, athletic, or talent-based aid, it will be listed there. Grants and scholarships are what we would call free aid. So this is what your student has earned based on their merit, athletic, or talent. And this is money that you do not have to pay back to the school or to the federal government. So what is need-based versus merit-based awards? Need-based is based on family's financial need, and that is why you fill out the FAFSA or the CSS or the financial aid form directly related to the college or university. They want to get this information so that they can hopefully help students who need additional funds to attend college. Will the number that you see at the end of the FAFSA tell you exactly how much you'll be paying for school? No, that's not going to be the case, but it does give you a rough idea of what the schools are seeing and what they're making their calculations based on. This includes grants, loans, and work study. Work study is a completely need-based program. That doesn't mean there aren't jobs on campus where students don't have to be work study to work there. For myself, I did not qualify for work study my freshman year of college, but I found a job on campus and they were willing to pay me through their office. So I was able to hold that job without having work study. There are loans that are based on need, as well as grants and scholarships. You may receive federal grants based on need. You may receive state grants. You may receive institutional aid based on need. All federal aid and most state aid is based on need. There is no merit-based federal aid. Just because you have the #1 student in the country of the United States, they will not be getting any aid based on that. So know that all federal and most state aid is based on need. For merit-based, this is recognition-based. You'll see with different institutions, it's a little bit different. Some public universities will put out their numbers of students must attain this on the ACT or SAT and have this GPA to receive this much in merit-based aid. With some private institutions, you may be invited to different interviews or scholarship competitions. Again, this is all recognition of the student's achievements based on academics normally. They're often compared to other students in the incoming class for their merit-based aid. So when they look at the class as a whole, universities are deciding, okay, who gets the most money and who gets the money in between all of that. Some of these awards will be renewable, some will not be. So this is a good question to ask when you're going through the financial aid package, is thinking more about, okay, is this a renewable scholarship? Will this be here all 4 years, or is it just a 1-year scholarship? Something to think about and something to check up on. Like I talked about, there are a couple of federal grants and scholarships out there for students. Again, these are based solely on financial need and then some other factors as well. The federal Pell Grant and the SEOG grant, as you'll most commonly hear it referred to, are based solely on need. When you fill out the FAFSA will tell you if you are eligible for these grants. And recently, the Pell Grant has been in the news because we will see more students eligible for the Pell Grant, and hopefully they'll receive more money. So it's always interesting to know a little bit more about these. You can always learn more at studentaid.gov at that website you see there. Again, you'll be getting the presentation email, so no need to write down that link. You can always click it once you get the PDF. But then there are 2 other grants here. The Teach Grant, which is for students who are going into education, so becoming a teacher. They can apply for a Teach Grant. And if they do not complete the requirements of this, it does turn into a loan. So students who really want to be teachers, this may be a good plan for them, but they must know that they want to be teachers, because if they do not complete the service requirements, then they do have to pay this money back. And the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant is for particular military service members and their family members. So these are things to ask questions about. Maybe if you know you qualify for some of these, great, but these may show up on your award letter. Like I said, there are a few types of student loans, first being federal, and we'll talk about the 2 types, direct subsidized and unsubsidized, as well as the Perkins loan that you may see. The Perkins loan has been changed a little bit and is no longer included for most students. So you'll most likely see direct subsidized and unsubsidized when you get your first award letter. And then the plus would be something you would apply for. And then with state, some states offer loans for residents or students studying, but this will not show up immediately on your award letter, normally first thing. So it's something to take into account depending on what state you live in and what state your student is going to school in. And then there are private student loans as well. These will not show up on your award letter from the institution because these would be private loans that you would apply for after you received your award letter. So let's talk a little bit more about the 2 types of federal direct loans. We've got subsidized and unsubsidized loans. These used to be called Stafford loans. So maybe your student is your child and you remember Stafford loans from back in the day. They have changed those over. Excuse me. They have changed those over to now be direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans. There is no credit check on these loans. The student is the borrower. It's okay if they have no credit history. They are still the borrower, and this starts building their credit history for them. Subsidized loans are only available to qualifying undergraduates. Subsidized loans are based on need. Subsidized loans don't accrue interest while the student is in school. And so only students with financial need receive subsidized loans. Some students receive all of their federal loans in unsubsidized, which does accrue interest while the student is in school. There are no subsidized loans for graduate students. Believe me, I totally wish there were, but there are no subsidized loans for graduate students. You can defer paying back on these loans if your student is enrolled at least half time in school. So if your student has been an undergraduate and they received loans throughout their time and they decide to go on to graduate school, they can defer the payment on those loans while they're enrolled in graduate school. After graduating, you have a 6-month grace period before your payments will start and you'll be expected to pay. Hopefully during that time, students can find a job where they're able to start budgeting and putting money towards their loans. And the rates are based off of when you borrowed the loan. So each year, your rates may be different on each of the 4 loans that you borrow for 4 years of college. Maybe you have 7, 8 different federal loans. They will all have different interest rates based off the year that you borrowed the loan. So you see here that first-year students who are dependents, so they are claimed as dependents on taxes, they are $5,500 worth of student loans that they can take out their first year from the federal government. The maximum subsidized, if they qualify, would be $3,500, and the other 25 or the other 2,000 would be in unsubsidized. So every student will have unsubsidized on their award letter, but not every student will have subsidized. Something to remember. And then you see there that each year it gradually goes up. You cannot take out more than $31,000 in federal student loans over your time as an undergraduate. That's an important piece of the puzzle. A lot of people are saying, oh my goodness, I have so much student loans. I, don't have time to pay them back. I can't pay them back. I don't have enough money. Know that the federal government is only allowing students to take out $31,000 worth of loans. And so a lot of times those students are speaking more about private student loans, and we'll get to those eventually as well. For graduate students, it is much higher, obviously, because graduate studies a lot of times are a little more expensive, and students are normally independent at this point in their life. And the aggregate limit is a lot higher, but hopefully by getting a graduate degree, they will be making more money. That's the hope. So do know that those limits are a little bit different for graduate students. And like I said, this is just kind of a rundown of the rates right now. To be 100% honest with you, in my time working in higher ed, I've never seen rates this low. Obviously, if you're paying back student loans, you know that your federal loans are on pause right now. You don't have to pay federal student loans right now. So the federal government is trying to help students have access to funds so that they can go to college. So please know that these rates are very good rates for students who, number one, have no credit history, and number two, are able to have no credit check and just get this money automatically. So I really recommend if you are offered federal student loans that and you need student loans to pay for college, that you look into them. And then there's the plus in graduate plus loans. The plus loans are something that you would apply for in addition to your federal loans that you already have on your award letter. Your federal parent plus loan for undergraduates is going to be based on the parent's credit, and so this parent plus loan would be under the parent's name. The parent would be the borrower. And these are pretty good rates as well. Some students decide on using the parent plus loan, some decide otherwise. There's also the graduate plus loan. So if a student who's a graduate student would like to receive additional funds from the federal government, they can apply and they would be the borrower, not their parent. Once you're in graduate school, the federal government is assuming you are independent of your parents, so the student is the one who pays. And there is no defer or grace period for parent plus loans, but you can request a deferment. So there's no automatic deferment or grace period, but you can request a deferment. With Graduate Plus, you have a 6-month grace period to begin paying those once you graduate.
Sarah, there was a question that came in. Are the interest rates based on the time in school or when you request them?
Yes, so the interest rate is based on the year that you take that loan out. So these interest rates that you're seeing here, if you're taking this a federal student loan, if you're receiving it for the year of 2021 through 2022, your rate would be 2.75% if you're an undergraduate. And this would be the interest rate that you pay once you begin paying them back. And if you have unsubsidized, it would be the rate that's being charged while you're in school. So it is based on when you take it out. Any other questions, Migdalia?
No other questions at this moment.
Thank you. So we've talked a lot about federal student loans. To be eligible to receive any federal student loan at all, you have to fill out the FAFSA. The federal government doesn't know you're going to school if you do not fill out the FAFSA. So go ahead and complete it every year. So if you're in school for 3 years as a graduate student, or 4, 5, 6 years, you need to complete it each year. Like I said, the federal government doesn't just know that you've decided to go to school. So this is how they would know, and this is how they get information. It's based on your tax returns from the prior year. And so it is important that you fill this out for your student or for yourself every year. Like I said, there are options outside of federal student loans. The reason why someone would take a private student loan is if they're not offered enough student loans to cover their balance, or possibly they need additional loans to cover, textbooks, living expenses, things of that nature. Private student loans, you have a ton of lender options borrowed through banks, credit unions, private companies. You've probably heard of Sallie Mae. They are a company that offers student loans, and all of the terms will vary based on the lender. So unfortunately, I can't tell you this is the interest rate for student loans, because private student loans do not have a one rate. You can shop around for rates, and the grace periods will differ as well. So remember that you need to ask those questions. What is the interest rate? What's the grace period? Do you have any additional fees? What are the repayment terms? And so you need to ask those questions if you've decided to go with an outside lender. There are potential benefits to some private student loans, such as a cosigner release option, because with private student loans, they do have to perform a credit check. And a lot of times, students who are going into their undergraduate years, or maybe even their graduate years, do not have a credit history built up just yet, so they may need a cosigner. And once the student has paid back a certain amount, there are options to get the cosigner released, which would be great. There are possible interest rate reductions with auto pay. I know that the credit union has this for our student loans. If you sign up for an auto pay, you do get a small interest rate reduction. Other things that may be included on your award letter: academic year. So what are they classifying your student as? In enrollment status, housing status. So have you filled out that housing contract and made sure that you have a living situation for campus? Additional links that maybe have more information. I know with our financial aid packages, we would send not only an email version, but also a physical copy so that people could read up a little bit more about all the things included in there, as well as the contact information for a financial aid office or counselor, as well as maybe the admissions office. I know at my institution, all rising freshmen spoke directly to their admissions counselor, even if it had to do with financial aid. At some institutions, you contact financial aid office directly. So it's important to look on each of those forms and know who to contact if you do have questions. So Migdalia, I think this is where you'll take over. If people have additional questions about anything from my section, please help yourself to writing them in the chat. Happy to answer any questions that do come up.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for your questions thus far. As Sarah mentioned, we will send you the PowerPoint so that you have that available to you. And we know it can be, there's a lot of information here, so you'll also have our contact information, and feel free to reach out if there's anything that we can help you with. So now that we have an understanding as to what is on the different award letters, let's get into essentially comparing them into much more specifics. Couple of different things that I want to start off with is really the cost of attendance. So what exactly is this? Well, the cost of attendance is what the universities and colleges will utilize to determine how much aid you're eligible to receive. This is part of the formula, and it essentially will take into account direct costs, which are usually the ones that we think of as billed. So anything that would be on your tuition bill, the tuition, the fees, room and board, etc., plus any indirect costs such as transportation, personal expenses, books. What schools will do is they essentially survey their students periodically to determine what these indirect costs will be. And indirect costs will also vary depending on the type of student. At an institution that has graduate and undergraduate students, the cost would be different because graduate costs are going to be different than undergraduate. Perhaps for the books, even their transportation costs could be different. And even within programs, some schools may have different cost of attendance. It will ultimately depend on that school. It will vary from one school to another. But why is this important? As we'll see, the cost of attendance is important, and you'll see it on the next slide, because when we're comparing award letters, that is essentially the numerator, the number that is taken, and then the expected family contribution is subtracted from that number. Now, the expected family contribution, as Sarah described earlier, is when you complete the FAFSA, so that free application for federal student aid that everyone would need to complete and complete in following years that you want to receive financial aid. You complete that form to get an expected family contribution. And that name is actually going to be changed in the near future because it's really a misleading name. It's not the expected family contribution. It's really a number that is utilized by schools to determine aid eligibility. So in this example, we're going to take a look at 3 possible colleges. College A, for the purpose of this example, all the colleges are going to have the same cost of attendance, $50,000. That is 100% us using it as an example. That is very unlikely, but it just makes this a little bit easier to explain. Your expected family contribution will be the same at all the different schools. That is more common. So you take the cost of attendance, you subtract the expected family contribution, and then you have a need of $40,000. College A is able to offer us grants and scholarships, or that free money that does not have to be repaid, in the amount of $18,000. Student loans, $5,500. In this specific example, we use undergraduate aid, but which is why all students will have $5,500 across the board for the first year. However, for graduate students, it would be different. But the concept would still be the same. Then you have work study, which, as Sarah mentioned, it's money that is not deducted from the tuition bill, but it is money that the student can earn up to should they choose to work. And work study is available to both undergrad and grad students. So at College A, you're getting a total aid package of $25,000, which looks pretty good, but let's compare it to College B. Now, College B is offering a little bit less, $22,500, and College C is going to offer even less than that. They're going to offer us $10,000. At first look, we may say, okay, College A, definitely that's the one. That's the one that makes the most sense. But there are things to consider. It may be different locations. You may determine that you may want to live off campus, or the student may want to live off campus. So there are a couple of different things to keep in mind. I do want to point out, as I said earlier, the student loans will be the same across the board because that is based off of federal regulations, essentially, federal guidelines, I should say, that if a student is a first year, they're eligible for up to $5,500 in those federal student loans. The work study will vary. That's where you see it here. It'll be different. Some schools will say zero. That's also very common. Some schools, if they might not have any work study listed, but they might come back to you and ask you, you could go to the school and ask for work study. They may be able to add it on afterwards. And work study, even it is helpful, just keep in mind, does not come off the tuition bill. So even though in this example, you have, an additional, College B is providing the most work study, it's not really providing that much more in aid than College C when it comes to work study, because that does not come off the tuition bill. Another piece, and this is really where the comparing really comes into place. As Sarah mentioned, we both used to work in financial aid offices, and this was something that I had all of my counselors do with all of our students, and I would do this with families as well. Have them understand the true cost. We never wanted a family to be surprised by the cost of our institution, so we really try to help them understand it because it is an investment. It is a lot of money. I mean, we know for some families it's going to be in the six figures, and we want folks to be aware of that and think about that when you're comparing award letters. And this is one of those slides that it's not the nicest to look at, oh my gosh, that's expensive, but it is important because we rather you do this now than the student sees it for the first time when they're doing their exit counseling for their student loans at graduation and realize, oh my gosh, how much did I borrow? Or when that parent gets the first student loan repayment payment is due. So we're going to take a look at all of the three colleges, and these three colleges, they're going to be billed different. So College A is going to send you a bill for about $50,000, College B 35, College C 20,000. So three different costs of the institutions. Their award letters are different, and the total aid, this is where I go back. Total aid for College A, it looks like it's a good one. It's 25,000. Not saying that it's not a good one, but keep in mind, as you'll see in the next row, that not all of that money is going to be applied towards the tuition bill. That work study of 1,500 for College A is added back. So instead of we look at it and we think, okay, my build cost is $50,000, my total aid is 25. Yeah, my tuition bill would be 25,000. It's not. So that additional that difference of 1,500 comes in the form of that work study. So it has to be added back to the tuition bill. And then we go to the work study, we think about the true cost, and that means adding the student loan. So you may think, oh, I'm being billed $26,500. That's what it cost. That's not the true cost, because remember, the student is borrowing, part of their award letter is $5,500. So we're going to take the tuition bill of $26,500 and add, and this is not, the school is not doing this math for you. It's not that you're going to pay the school that $5,500, but this is for you as a student or family, or both, the family and the student, to realize how much is it actually costing me? Because even though, here we see that the true cost is $32,000. Another way of looking at it, which is actually, it is simpler, but I think it's important to go through the entire process, is that if the build costs are $50,000, the only thing that you're really getting for free are those grants and scholarships. So $50,000 minus that $18,000, that's going to get you to $32,000. However, it's not laid out that way. So when you get your award letter, when you get your tuition bill, it's easy to think, oh, it's, I'm only paying $25,000. Okay, I'm paying $26,500. But in reality, you're going to be paying that $32,000. And, you're doing that, and as you'll see in the next row, for most of us, for about 4 years. Graduate programs could be different, undergrad programs could also. And this is where, when we're comparing award letters, this is what we want you to compare. Compare the estimated cost for all years that the student will be in school. Because, at first sight, you might think, oh yeah, College A, they're giving me the most. That makes sense. But really, then you look at it, you're like, ooh, College C is, 40,000 is a huge difference versus 128. Or you might be somewhere in the middle with College B at about 80,000. We know that budgeting for these numbers, it's a lot. It's a lot to see those numbers and really to think, how am I going to do this? How am I supposed to, where am I going to get the money? Is my credit good enough to maybe borrow, or can I do anything to improve my credit score so maybe my loan rates are lower? There are things you can do. We have free accredited credit counseling through our partners at Green Path Financial Wellness. This is a great resource that you can take advantage of. Sarah dropped it in the chat so that you have that. Save this information. If you want to take a screenshot of this, we are going to email it to you, but if you want to just take a screenshot, you could do that too, or take a picture with your phone. That way you have it whenever you need it, whenever you're like, you know what, I want to talk to someone about my budget, or maybe have someone review my credit to see if I have a good credit score. That's going to just give you more peace of mind. One of the most challenging pieces of my prior role as the Director of Student Financial Services was having families in front of me around August or July or even September, right before move-in, and they were not sure how they were going to pay for it, because at that point, the student is excited, they've already bought everything. The parent didn't realize that their credit wasn't good enough, and then they couldn't borrow, so now they're sort of in a bind. So anything you could do to prevent yourself from being in that situation, just to empower yourself to have more options. There are ways that you can reduce expenses, and even though this is about comparing award letters, we're going to give you some tips to how you could possibly save some money or some ways that you can reduce those costs. Here are a couple different options that you can ask the college about or the university. I can't emphasize this enough. Many times we get the students that would come and ask us questions. Well, can you give us more aid? Can you give us more aid? There are times that schools can do that, but it's not as often as people may think. Really, schools go into it giving you the best financial aid possible. There are times that they may make adjustments because the information that you provided may have changed, meaning there may have been a loss of income, or there could have been additional expenses that your family is now taking on. This is very common if there were unexpected medical expenses, if there was a death of a parent or someone else in the household that was helping provide financial support. So there are a lot of situations where your finances may change, and as a result, the financial aid office can look at your updated finances to see if the student is eligible for more aid. In most cases, they that may not be enough, or they may be able to help a little bit more. But what you could also do, and what is not done as often, and I encourage you to do this, is ask the school what other options there are to reduce the cost. So again, there's the option of, can you provide more aid, which they may or may not be able to, but there is also this option of reducing cost. There are room and board options. There are this is one that always sort of surprised me, when a parent would call in and say, well, is there more aid available? And I would just tell them, it's like, well, your child's living in a single. They could live in a double, a quad, and the parent had no idea that the student chose the most expensive room and board option. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can usually switch room and board options or find one that's a little bit more affordable. Health insurance, if your student, or if you as the student are covered by health insurance, you may not need to utilize the school's health insurance. If you have multiple children attending school, also for graduate students, I know we have a couple of you on today. If you and your partner or someone else in your household is also going to school, sometimes they may be able to take that into account. The other big one is academic planning. There are times that, and it's just sort of the way that it's worked. It'll be interesting to see in the upcoming year, this summer and next summer, what changes this will happen with have happened with the pandemic and summer courses. But historically, summer courses are less expensive. So if students wanted to take a summer class, sometimes it was like a quarter of the cost of other classes that they would take during the fall. Part of it because it's condensed, it's um, you're on campus for a shorter time period, but you'd still get the same credits. So that's a strategy that some of you could implement either as a student or work with the student if you're the parent or caregiver, to see if they can plan to either graduate a semester early. Maybe they can transfer credits. Maybe they can take a summer class elsewhere. Summer classes, that was very common for where I worked at a private school, and we had a good amount of students that would go back home during the summer, and they would just take a class at their local community college, especially if it was a basic prereq, and like a bio 101 or math or something along those lines. And they would just transfer those credits in. And the cost to them was a couple $100 because it was a community college, it was close, and it helped them stay on track to graduate earlier. Other things to keep in mind, there are student scholarships specifically for returning students, both for undergrad and grad. You always have to check with your financial aid office. And I know Sarah and I keep saying that. The reality is every school is different. So some have more funds, some have a little bit less, some have earlier deadlines. You always want to check with them. And speaking of scholarships, you also have private scholarships that are available to the students. And the private scholarships that you'll see on this upcoming slide, I always recommend that if it's free, that the private scholarships, you're applying for free money, so that the search should be free, shouldn't have to pay for it. Start locally, start with the school counselor, start with employers, graduate students, check with if you're currently working or if someone in your household is, see if their employer would provide scholarships to those in the household. I know for myself, when I was going to undergrad, my mother's job offered a scholarship for me, and I was able to have a renewing scholarship, a little bit over 10,000 over the 4 years, which was really nice. And it was, through her HR office. And all I had to do was complete a very simple application, and it was a very, very helpful. Also, cities and towns, some financial institutions. As you'll see, for us, we have our own scholarship. This one is specific to our undergrad populations. We are definitely looking to expand that and hope we will, but I don't think we'll be able to do that for the 22-23 academic year, but something to keep in mind. Check with if you're not a member of the credit union, we would love for you to be a member, but if you're not a member, check with your financial institution and see if they offer any private scholarships. For our private scholarships specifically, it has to be a parent or the student who would have to be a member to be eligible, and we have 10 $1,000 scholarships that we offer. And also keep in mind, and this is really important, you have to compare the experience. We talk a lot about numbers, and that is very important. Yes, the financial piece of it, but you also have to think about the experience academic experience, the social experience. We want the students to be happy. And I've seen the cost of students being unhappy, sometimes being more expensive than had the student chosen to go where they wanted to at the beginning. For example, if a student, and this is more common with undergrads, not so much with graduate students. I think just with the nature of a graduate program, you're a little bit more decided by the time you sign up. But for undergraduate students, we would have students that would transfer in or out of our institution. And sometimes in the process of transferring, the credits that you earned may not all transfer over, or it may end up being a little bit more expensive because maybe they transferred 2 years in and decided to change a program. So it is important to really look at the experience as well and realize that, yes, the financial piece is important, but there's also the academic, the social, and all the other pieces that will help contribute to the students' well-being academically, socially, and mentally. It's a lot here. So I'll do a very quick recap. And as I'm doing this recap, please feel free to drop in the questions panel anything else that we could clarify for you, whether it's about the college award letter process, the tuition bill, anything college related. Sarah and I will do our best between the two of us. You're in really good hands, so we should be able to answer or get you the information if we don't have the answers. A couple of things here. Be organized. Comparing those award letters, I'm an Excel type of person. I like visually seeing things. If that's not your way of comparing, that's fine. But look for whatever method works for you and really sit down and actually compare. And make sure you understand what's on the award. Never feel embarrassed to ask. In fact, and this is a strategy that I use sort of across the board when it comes to my finances. If I'm deciding to do business with someone, I sometimes, even if I know the answer 100%, I may ask just to see how they react, because I want to be comfortable with the person that I'm doing business with. I want you to be comfortable with the school that you're going to, either the student will go to or that you as a parent are sending your child to, or as a caregiver. Because if you ask a question and you're not getting the right level of detailed answer, that may be a sign, or they're going to be that helpful once you're in the actual institution. Also, remember to compare all the different costs. It's not just the costs that we mentioned. There are also going to be additional costs, like if as a student's living on campus, the cost of furnishing that room, transportation, books, and everything else that comes into play. New outfits, all these different things that you may not think of, laptops that may add up. I spoke about this before, but it's a full experience. It's not just the cost that is important, but there's much more. And the last one is keeping in mind that there are ways to reduce the cost. So as you are looking into colleges, and I did see that we had a parent of a junior. That's a great question when you're doing the virtual tours or any virtual open houses or in person if the schools are offering, just to ask what are some ways to reduce the cost? You don't have to wait until the student has been admitted to have those conversations. And for graduate students, this is also an option. There are programs that will have different ways for you to minimize cost. So definitely make sure to ask about that as well. We provide a little bit more information here, just some general information. But if you have anything that you would like to further go into details with, please let us know. On the next slide, we're going to ask you to very quickly, hopefully before you log off, if you can do us one very quick favor, which is complete a survey. We use the survey with the EAP office to determine essentially what content to bring to you, how we can improve, whether it's the time of day, whether it is the length of the session, whether it's what we covered or didn't cover. You know, Sarah and I want to make sure we're always doing what's best for our community. So do not worry about our feelings. We want to hear how we can improve. And, you know, if you did like it, that would be nice to hear as well. We went through a lot of information, and we do have to provide a disclaimer that it is general information. It's not, we can't be specific to your situation because we just don't know what your situation is like. And as you see on this slide, the disclaimer, you'll be, we also not providing tax advice. Sarah, if you don't mind, the next slide. We're not providing tax advice. We also can't provide legal or investment advice. And if you do have, I didn't mention this, but if you do have any 529s or other college savings, whether that's for undergrad or grad, definitely we will have another presentation where we talk more about paying for college, but you want to make sure that you're thinking about, are you going to withdraw those funds just for the first semester or for all throughout? And that in itself is a strategy as well, as you're comparing ways to pay for the tuition bill. Here you have our socials. We hope that you can keep in touch, follow us on social media channels. We also have a blog where we put a lot of information about college financing, applying for college, student loan repayment. On our blog, you can essentially search based off of different tags, and we update it about twice or 3 times a week. So it is very timely.